So guys, it's a day later, and as you can see, the transmission and transfer case is out. But outside, yeah, it's too bad the Jeep's not working at the moment, because it'd be quite fun. We could go out and have some fun in the snow again. It's not quite as bad as last time as well, so might be a bit more entertaining. But there you go, such is life. But yeah, there we go. That is a transfer and transmission on the cross member out of my GPW. So yeah, we got it out. I didn't record all that stuff because otherwise you'd probably end up with a video with me getting squashed underneath the Jeep. But fortunately, it came out okay, and it's really not as bad as you might expect. It just takes time and thought and doing things slowly, really. You can't rush it. It's not easy, let's put it that way. You don't want to be doing it every single day, but it's also not impossible as well. So it can be done. Getting it back in is going to be more difficult. Getting the alignment correct is going to be a bit of a chore, really, and as it's quite heavy and difficult to move down there, yeah, I can imagine it being a bit of a pain. So what we're going to do is separate the transfer case from the transmission, which is not quite as straightforward as just unbolting it. There's a little bit more involved than that. We'll come to that. But yeah, just to go on about actually removing it then. So the main thing about it really is you have to lower the engine down. Okay, so the transfer case and the cross member is held on by the bolts. So when it's on its stand, I undid the bolts and allowed it to drop down a little bit, and this allows the engine to rock back. You can see it's rocked back a little bit there, and you can rock it back all the way till it sits on the firewall. I put a bit of towel cloth in there to prevent it damaging the firewall, but it doesn't seem to have done anything whatsoever. So you let the engine come back, and when it's back, you can then access these top bolts. After removing the starter motor, you can access the top bolts there, which are difficult to do. You can see the other ones to take apart are not so difficult, but those top ones are quite difficult. It's not easy, but all I can say is it can be done. So there's no real quick and easy way to do it that I found, other than sticking your hand in and reaching bolts. So the bolt on the top of the bell housing, which is about here, I got my friend, or my brother, to hold a spanner on here while I reached down, and my arm had to go. I mean, it doesn't look like, move the horn a little bit. You could make more space and remove some more parts, but all I did is I literally jammed my hand in here and undid that bolt, which on one which is seized would be very difficult, because I was only able to put down through a certain amount of force. So it's not easy, but it can be done. There is another way to access those as well. I found, lying underneath, I was able to stick my hand up through here as well, and I could get it through. I've got fairly large hands, skinny but large hands, so I was able to get it through there to access the bolts, and then you could access some up this way as well. So really, it's not easy. There's no easy way to do it. You've got to be nimble. You've got to be, you know, you're undoing bolts you can't see, which are going to have to take a lot of force. So yeah, there's no real easy way to do it, but when you get them done, it's all about the alignment of the engine with the transmission. So you've dropped it down, but let me put the camera, see if this comes out. When you've dropped it down, if this is the engine here and this is the transmission, you know, it's all down like this. This is the front, it's dropped down, but what you need to do then is they can't be at an angle to each other, so you have to jack up the engine and jack up the transmission when you're undoing the bolts, so that they come out perfect like this. Then it'll just slide back. If, you know, the engine is down too far and the transmission is up too far when you're undoing the bolts, it's going to smack, and the nose gear isn't going to slide out easily out of the clutch, so you can't do it. So it's all about having a look at the angles and getting them right so they just slide off. Hopefully there you can see that with my hands there. And once it had slid off, it was on the engine, it was on the stand here, and all I did is I undid the bell housing and pulled it out. The bell housing is not too heavy, you know, it's not light, but it's not mega heavy either. So I undid that and just pulled it off. She looks pretty good. No issues there. And then for this, I actually just slid it off the back of the stand. So I'd got it on rags, hadn't I? And I put blankets down the back of it, and I just gently rocked it off, and it just landed on this. Well, it didn't land, it just slid off, and then just pulled it out with the blankets there. So that worked really good, but to get it back in, you have to jack the Jeep right up high and fit it on there and slide it and then put the bell housing on. So that's going to be more difficult, but you just got to jack your Jeep up as high as you can, which is easier said than done, because it's higher than a normal jack will take it. But the other important thing then is, so the engine now, it can rest on the firewall. You know, if I let it, it would rest at an angle, you know, all the way back, sitting on the firewall. But I don't like that because it's usually supported at the rear, obviously, by the cross member, this and this. So that's how it's usually held up. But when it's all the way back, it's damaging or bending these rubber mounts in a position they're not supposed to be in. So I'm sure they're absolutely fine, but I just don't like that. It's going to be like that for a couple of weeks. So what I've done is I've just, excuse me, jacked it up and put some blocks underneath there to hold it up. So if the jack, you know, the jack will let the pressure down over time, but that doesn't matter because it's actually supported by the blocks there. So that's how I've done that. So there we go. That's removing the transmission and transfer case. Fairly straightforward, sort of, but just takes time, effort, thought, care, yeah, really, to do it, and a bit of manpower and a bit of luck, really. Like I said, on one which is all corroded and terrible, it's going to be very difficult, unfortunately, guys. There's no two ways about it. You know, if you're doing a proper rebuild, it's probably just best to take the tub off rather than doing things like this. But there we go. So today then we'll take off our idler bearing there. That's a sealed unit. You can see it's actually throwing some out there, so we'll take this off. This is all original. These gaskets here are World War II Ford ones, actually. There's a guy selling a load on eBay, and they were perfect. You can see that they line up absolutely beautifully. They hadn't shrunk or anything like that. And in here, inside the front there, is the cork seal, the original impregnated cork seal, which doesn't leak a bit. You know, guys were talking about using seal bearings on the front and things like that, and having leaks and what have you. But have I got a seal bearing? It looks like I've got a seal bearing there. But there's a gallery. The oil can go out to the front here. It has to be, because yeah, there's a gallery which takes the oil out into the front here, and then it can leak out. And people have been blocking them up and what have you, and all sorts of things. But I found this cork seal hasn't leaked at all, which is fantastic. So we're lucky with that. And yeah, everything else. When I originally put the transmission together, you see these aren't wire locked. These were leaking through the stud holes. Some of these holes go directly into the oil, and if these aren't, if you haven't got sealant on them, it leaks out here. So I was chasing leaks, going, you know, I've sealed the hell out of this because I couldn't work out where it was leaking from. I put loads of sealant on it, but all it was the bolts leaking through the bolts. So all that sealant was not required. So yeah, a lot of that sealant's got to come off, and next time we're not going to be sealing these quite as tight as we did. But it's more about the bolts that I found. But yeah, it's going to be interesting now getting this apart. So there's a big gear and a big nut which holds the output shaft on here, and that's up to, I think mine's up to 150 Newton meters. I can't remember, but it's up to a hell of a lot of force. And there was some talk online about what the correct setting for that is, but it seems to me, from my reading, I mean, people do all sorts of things, but I reckon I think I did mine up to like 150, I think is what I decided on in the end, which is a lot. So to do that, you have to lock, you know, you can't turn it because the whole thing, or this, it's not engaged at the moment, the whole thing turns. So I've built a tool which goes on here to lock it so that I can undo here. So that's what we're going to come to now then, guys. So guys, this is where the real fun begins. Once you've got your split pin out, you've got to take this nut off. Now the nut's quite shallow for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, because there's a huge amount of space back there. But it takes a big bar like this, and this is what, Laura, it's 1/5/16 is what that is, it says. and that fits on there perfectly. So you've got to get your big bar on there, which needs an extension on it because it's got a long way to come out, all this extra space here. And then you need to have a special tool. Now, I made this tool. This is just built out of an old steering column and a torque reaction spring. But you can see it's in a, it's strong. It's a strong tool. It's in a specific shape here, so that I can actually access these as well. So I can use it to lock the output shafts. So I can undo these as well. So I can get a socket in there and undo it. They go underneath, and then I can get it in there and it undoes. So that's a tool I made for it, and it works really well. So obviously it's in, I put it in 4-wheel drive so that this is connected all the way through here, so that if I lock this one by holding this bar, I can undo back here. So that's a tool I made. Unfortunately, there's no real way around it. I mean, unless you get unless you've got good pneumatic tools, power tools, which can just whiz the nut off, you know, without any sort of counter hold. But that's not going to really help you when it comes to putting the thing back together. Yeah, so I've just undone my nut, guys. But the interesting thing about it was that it was quite tight on the cotter pin, so I'm not entirely sure, and it came off fairly easily. And this was done up to 150 Newton meters, I think. I'm not sure if it hadn't started to work its way undone, which is interesting, which shows the importance of the torque rating. I'm not entirely sure about that. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it hadn't started to undo itself, but it seems strange. But that was definitely done up to 150 Newton meters. But it's come off now. Here it comes. This is the nut, the special cotter pin nut with only, you've got to put a lot of force through it, but the faces are only very small. Look at that, it comes off nicely. Nicely lubed. There we go. So there it is. Only little small faces on it, so we'll take that out, put that to the side. Once that's done, I believe this can just come out. There, here we go. So it's rotating as it's through the gears. Twink, and then I'm trying to keep as much dirt out of here. I'm not going to rebuild it, but I'm trying to keep as much dirt out as possible. There's our gear. There's the oil slinger on the back, the bearings, and then there's a washer. There we go, which goes on there. And there was some sealant on this. Can you see? There was some sealant. So to stop oil migration from the front to the rear through the splines, because you can, at high speeds, you can have the oil pumps from, I can't remember which way around it is, but it can pump anyway. It pumps from either from one case to the other. So to stop oil migration, you can have double sealed bearings. I've got single sealed, so they're open on this side, so the lube comes from this side for this set. But then I also sealed the splines as well to prevent oil migration. But this is an original World War II gear. It's pretty good. I remember it was very nice. There's no reason that it shouldn't still be very nice. Ready to go back in again. So let's put you to the side. I need to make somewhere clean now to put all these parts and start cleaning them off. But once that's done now, the transmission and transfer case can be separated undoing these bolts on here. But I'm going to get the yokes off first. But that's it. All separated, ready to go there.